So I'm here at SALT 2019 with Ryan Crocker, who is diplomat in residence at Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School and the former U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan and Iraq, among other places. So what does the U.S. get the most wrong about the Middle East?
Time moves at a very different rate in the Middle East. We Americans, we want it done now. Certainly by the end of the day, very latest day after tomorrow. If that doesn't happen, we move on. Middle Easterners have learned to think not just in months and years, but in decades. So we are at a disadvantage in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, where our adversaries are prepared to wait us out. Even if it takes 20 years, they will still be there. They will bet we'll be gone. And they have been right in Iraq, and I'm afraid they're about to be right in Afghanistan.
You've argued most recently in a Washington Post op-ed that President Donald Trump is surrendering in Afghanistan. Will you elaborate on that and explain what the dangers are?
So I was a career diplomat. Diplomacy 101, kind of your basic course in diplomacy, is never negotiate from a position of weakness. In these negotiations with the Taliban, we have basically caved before we ever got to the table. They have said for 15 years, we'll talk to the Americans, but we won't talk to their puppet regime in Kabul, only the Americans. We gave up on that point. The Afghan government is not represented at these talks. And it's basically then bringing to mind the 1970s, the Paris peace talks over Vietnam. It was established then, as I'm afraid it's being established now, that we were surrendering. We're done. We just want to put as much lipstick on this thing as we possibly can as we had for the doors. So again, as these talks continue, the Afghan government is still not there. And I think the direction this is going is sadly pretty clear. After almost 20 years, we're saying we quit.
How worried are you in this context about Saudi Arabia's weakening economic state and the fragility that that might bring to the Middle East as well?
Saudi Arabia, of course, is spending more than they're taking in, but their reserves are huge. They are far better prepared to go through a prolonged period of deficit budgets than, say, our other countries like Iran or Iraq. So that isn't what worries me so much about Saudi Arabia. What worries me about Saudi Arabia, frankly, is us. That the core of the post-World War II Middle East order was the U.S.-Saudi relationship. Now we're backing away from that. And the Saudis are moving out on their own, as they've done in Yemen, without talking to us. They are under uncertain leadership with a very young crown prince who has done some pretty spectacularly awful things. We need to sit down ourselves. We need to sit down with the Saudis and say, wait a minute. 75 years of this, let's not throw it away. Let's figure out a way to move ahead together. I don't see that happening.
I wish the news were better, but thank you for sharing your perspective with us. It's really invaluable. So one of the things I find frightening and fascinating about this is that just as worries about short-termism in the business world are dominating our fears of where corporate America is heading, turns out that we have short-termism in our political world to worry about as well.